It's oh shit. God, I am so sorry. For first and foremost, I didn't. To be honest, I oh nice, that's cool. That's oh yeah, the Neuro-sama emotes, that's so good. But I hope you can forgive me. It's been a few days since the last time I streamed, and I kind of forgot about the whole like ritual, so I ended up accidentally like not having Sammy on for like the first 5 minutes. I'm sorry, okay? It's been a long week. Like I was like I was having like a bad time on Monday, and then on Tuesday, like Tuesday afternoon, I had to like go out to the big city to like get my I had to get some like business stuff done, which actually it actually ended up not even really being that worth it, because like first of all, like on the drive there, we ended up hitting traffic like right before we were supposed to get to our hotel. And then so I was like carpooling with my coworker, and I ended up sharing a hotel with her. We like split it. And that was kind of a bad choice, because turns out she really snores a lot. So I didn't sleep very well this past night. So then like in the morning, like I thought the hotel had like the continental breakfast, and I was really excited for that, like the breakfast buffet. But then we got down there in the morning when they were serving breakfast supposedly, and it was just like some fruit. They had like pre-packaged muffins, like very very small muffins, and they had like the Jimmy Dean pre-made like breakfast sandwiches, like literal gas station quality food. Gas station quality food as like a complimentary thing. I guess they stopped doing the buffet stuff apparently during the pandemic, and I guess they just like never brought it back again, which is a real shame. And also I'll take a sip. I have my tea again as usual. Mm. And there you go. Um, but after that, we packed up and we went to the office, because I guess it's like an office. I was thinking this was more of like a like an auditorium situation, but it really is just like a space they rented out in a building or whatever for our like meeting that we were supposed to attend. And I mean, like the whole thing was supposed to take place in this like office, like like meeting room, and we had like 30 people there. So like half of them were actually in the office. The other half of us were like, we were just like pushed out to like the office like cubicle area, and we just kind of like watched we watched the conference like on our computers, as if like as if it didn't even matter. We could have just done this exact same thing at home. But then like nothing in the office worked. I was supposed to like hook my computer up to these like other monitors like I have in my home office, but then like none of them worked correctly, so I barely got anything done today. And then like it took a while for me to get back home. So we agreed that like we weren't gonna we were probably gonna avoid doing like the in-person stuff like that in the future, because it was mostly just like a waste of time. I mean, they gave me like a shirt, but that was it. I could have I could have gone without, and I probably would have been more productive. Um, but yeah, we didn't really have time to like go out and sightsee in the city or anything because it was just like a 1 day like day trip thing, and we didn't really like have any time once we got out of the office stuff at the end of the day. At least I got to go home early, but you know, by the end of it, I literally had to like get back in my PJs and like lay down on the couch with the lights off because it was just like such a snafu. But I'm glad to be back home. I'm glad to be back on stream. I hope you guys didn't miss me too much, because that would have been bad. I mean, I really wanted to stream Monday, and I might actually take Monday. Didn't miss me at all. Oh, that hurts my feelings. But I think I'm gonna take what I was planning to stream Monday and actually push that back to Friday, because honestly I didn't actually end up like, I didn't get any work done that I was supposed to because I was just like not in the mood like at all. So I think we might still be able to like get some work done on stream on Friday. And let me tell you something. I changed the have a nice lurkson, but I went to change the stream info on my phone, and the phone does not have like the option for like the sub only streams. So if I hadn't like double checked it on the PC, I would have accidentally made this go live in like sub only mode. That would have been a disaster. But I'm glad we didn't, because we have some reading to do after my like 10-minute monologue. I probably need to higher access. Hello, you actually came just in time. Let me take a sip of my tea first. Man, I don't know how I did it, but I think I ended up putting too much honey in my tea. Flanders, Flanzen? I can't tell if that's an L or an I. I'm assuming it's an L, but thank you very much for the follow. Much appreciated. But I assume the tea isn't gonna be too bad, because then like the lemon peel in there is probably gonna even things out eventually. But for now, it's not the most pleasant drink, unfortunately. But I do have my water here as well. So I guess to recap here, we're on chapter 29 of The Shining. I forgot what I was I forgot the name for a second. But last time when we left off, Danny had just been like strangled by a like dead lady ghost, and they found him and he was like in shock. Very, very graphic stuff. But we're just gonna get right into it, I think. So, you know, we're back. Everything's gonna be okay. And I think we're just gonna have like a nice evening, hopefully. Okay, hold on. It feels like it's too soon, but like my mouth, like my throat and stuff feels kind of dry already. I took another sip. Hopefully that's enough. Okay, so chapter 29, kitchen talk. Jack carried Danny into the kitchen. The boy was still sobbing wildly, refusing to look up from Jack's chest. In the kitchen, he gave Danny back to Wendy, who still seemed stunned and disbelieving. Jack, I don't know what he's talking about. Please, you must believe that. I do believe it, he said, although he had to admit to himself that it gave him a certain amount of pleasure to see the shoe switch to the other foot, with such dazzling, unexpected speed. But his anger at Wendy had only been a passing gut twitch. In his heart, he knew Wendy would pour a can of gasoline over herself and strike a match before harming Danny. The large tea kettle was on the back burner, poking along in low heat. Jack dropped a tea bag into his own large ceramic cup and poured hot water halfway. Got cooking sherry, don't you? He asked Wendy. What? Oh, sure. 2 or 3 bottles of it. Which cupboard? She pointed, and Jack took one of the bottles down. He poured a hefty dollop into the teacup, put the sherry back, and filled the last quarter of the cup with milk. Then he added 3 tablespoons of sugar and stirred. He brought it to Danny, whose sobs had tapered off to snifflings and hitchings, but he was trembling all over, and his eyes were wide and starey. Want you to drink this, Doc, Jack said. It's gonna taste friggin' awful, but it'll make you feel better. Can you drink it for your daddy? Danny nodded that he could and took the cup. He drank a little, grimaced, and looked questioningly at Jack. Jack nodded. Danny drank again. Wendy felt the familiar twist of jealousy somewhere in her middle, knowing the boy would not have drunk it for her. Oh, man, it's like nice out tonight. So like all the motorcycle people are out, and it's interrupting my vibe. All right. On the heels of that came an uncomfortable, even startling thought. Had she wanted to think Jack was to blame? Was she that jealous? It was the way her mother would have thought. That was really the terrible thing. She could remember a Sunday when her dad had taken her to the park, and she had toppled from the 2nd tier of the jungle gym, cutting both knees. When her father brought her home, her mother had shrieked at him. What did you do? Why weren't you watching her? What kind of a father are you? She hounded him to his grave. By the time he divorced her, it was too late. She had never even given Jack the benefit of the doubt, not the smallest. Wendy felt her face burn, yet knew with a kind of helpless finality that if the whole thing were to be played over again, she would do and think the same way. She carried part of her mother with her always, for good or bad. Jack, she began, not sure if she meant to apologize or justify. Either, she knew, would be useless. Not now, he said. It took Danny 15 minutes to drink half of the big cup's contents, and by that time he had calmed visibly. The shakes were almost gone. Jack put his hands solemnly on his son's shoulders. Danny, do you think you can tell us exactly what happened to you? It's very important. Danny looked from Jack to Wendy, then back again. In the silent pause, their setting and situation made themselves known. The whoop of the wind outside, driving fresh snow down from the northwest. The creaking and groaning of the old hotel as it settled into another storm. The fact of their disconnect came to Wendy with unexpected force, as it sometimes did, like a blow under the heart. I want to tell you everything, Danny said. I wish I had before. He picked up the cup and held it, as if comforted by its warmth. Why don't you, son? Jack brushed Danny's sweaty, tumbled hair back gently from his brow. Because Uncle Al got you the job, and I couldn't figure out how it was good for you here and bad for you at the same time. It was... He looked at them for help. He did not have the necessary word. A dilemma? Wendy asked gently. When neither choice seems any good? Yes, that. He nodded, relieved. Wendy said, the day that you trimmed the hedges, Danny and I had a talk in the truck. The day the first real snow came, remember? Jack nodded. The day he had trimmed the hedges was very clear in his mind. Wendy sighed. I guess we didn't talk enough, did we, Doc? Danny, the picture of woe, shook his head. Exactly what did you talk about? Jack asked. I'm not sure how much I like my wife and son. Discussing how much they love you? Whatever it was, I don't understand it. I feel like I came into a movie just after the intermission. We were discussing you, Wendy said quietly. And maybe we didn't say it all in words, but we both knew. Me, because I'm your wife, and Danny, because he just understands things. Jack was silent. Danny said it just right. The place seemed good for you. You were away from all the pressures that made you so unhappy at Stovington. You were your own boss, working with your hands so you could save your brain, all of your brain, for your evening's writing. Then, I don't know just when, the place began to seem bad for you. Spending all that time down in the cellar, sifting through those old papers, all that old history, talking in your sleep. In my sleep? Jack asked. His face wore a cautious, startled expression. I talk in my sleep? Most of it's slurry. Once I got up to use the bathroom and you were saying to hell with it. Bring in the slots at least. No one will know. No one will know. Another time you woke me right up, practically yelling, unmask, unmask, unmask. Jesus Christ, he said, and rubbed a hand over his face. He looked ill. All your old drinking habits, too. Chewing Excedrin, wiping your mouth all the time, cranky in the morning. And you haven't been able to finish the play yet, have you? No, not yet, but it's only a matter of time. I've been thinking about something else. A new project. This hotel. The project Al Shockley called you about. The one he wanted you to drop. How did you know about that? Jack barked. Were you listening in? No, she said. I couldn't have listened in if I wanted to. And you'd know that if you were thinking straight. Danny and I were downstairs that night. The switchboard is shut down. Our phone upstairs was the only one in the hotel that was working because it's patched directly into the outside line. You told me so yourself. Then how come you know what Al told me? Danny told me. Danny knew. The same way he sometimes knows when things are misplaced or when people are thinking about divorce. The doctor said, she shook her head impatiently, the doctor was full of shit and we both know it. We've known it all the time. Remember when Danny said he wanted to see the fire trucks? That was no hunch. He was just a baby. He knows things. And now I'm afraid. She looked at the bruises on Danny's neck. Did you really know Uncle Al called me Danny? Danny nodded. He was really mad, Daddy, because you called Mr. Ullman and Mr. Ullman called him. Uncle Al didn't want you to write anything about the hotel. Jesus, Jack said again. The bruises, Danny. Who tried to strangle you? Danny's face went dark. Her, he said. The woman in that room in 217. The dead lady. His lips began to tremble again, and he seized the teacup and drank. Jack and Wendy exchanged a scared look over his bowed head. Do you know anything about this? He asked her. She shook her head. Not about this, no. Danny, he raised the boy's frightened face. Try, son. We're right here. I knew it was bad here, Danny said in a low voice. Ever since we were in Boulder, because Tony gave me dreams about it. What dreams? I can't remember everything. He showed me the overlook at night with a skull and crossbones on the front, and there was pounding. Something, I don't remember what, chasing after me. A monster. Tony showed me about red rum. What's that, Doc? Wendy asked. He shook his head. I don't know. Rum like yo-ho-ho in a bottle of rum? Jack asked. Danny shook his head again. I don't know. Then we got here and Mr. Halloran talked to me in his car because he has the shine too. Shine? Danny made a sweeping, all-encompassing gesture with his hands. It's being able to understand things, to know things. Sometimes you see things, like me knowing Uncle Al called, and Mr. Halloran knowing you called me Doc. Mr. Halloran, he was peeling potatoes in the army when he knew his brother got killed in a train crash. And when he called home, it was true. Holy God, Jack whispered. You're not making this up, are you, Dan? Danny shook his head violently. No, I swear to God. Then with a touch of pride, he added, Mr. Halloran said I had the best shine of anyone he ever met. We could talk back and forth to each other without hardly opening our mouths. His parents looked at each other again, frankly stunned. Mr. Halloran got me alone because he was worried, Danny went on. He said this was a bad place for people who shine. He said he'd seen things. I saw something too, right after I talked to him, when Mr. Ullman was taking us around. What was it? Jack asked. In the presidential suite, on the wall by the door going into the bedroom. A whole lot of blood and some other stuff. Gushy stuff. I think that the gushy stuff must have been brains. Oh my God, Jack said. Wendy was now very pale, her lips nearly gray. This place, Jack said. Some pretty bad types owned it a while back. Organization people from Las Vegas. Crooks, Danny said. Yeah, crooks. He looked at Wendy. In 1966, a big-time hood named Vito Gianelli got killed up there, along with his 2 bodyguards. There was a picture in the newspaper. Danny just described the picture. Mr. Halloran said he saw some other stuff, Danny told them. Once about the playground, and once it was something bad in that room, 217. A maid saw it and lost her job because she talked about it. So Mr. Halloran went up and he saw it too. But he didn't talk about it because he didn't want to lose his job. Except he told me never to go in there, but I did. Because I didn't believe him when he said the things you saw there couldn't hurt you. This last was nearly whispered in a low, husky voice, and Danny touched the puffed circle of bruises on his neck. What about the playground? Jack asked in a strange, casual voice. I don't know. The playground, he said. And the hedge animals. Jack jumped a little, and Wendy looked at him curiously. Have you seen anything down there, Jack? No, he said. Nothing. Danny was looking at him. Nothing, he said again more calmly. And that was true. He had been the victim of a hallucination, and that was all. Danny, we have to hear about the woman, Wendy said gently. So Danny told them, but his words came in cyclic bursts, sometimes almost verging on incomprehensible garble, in his hurry to spit it out and be free of it. He pushed tighter and tighter against his mother's breasts as he talked. Okay. I went in, he said. I stole the pass key and went in. It was like I couldn't help myself. I had to know. And she, the lady, was in the tub. She was dead, all swelled up. She was didn't have clothes on. He looked miserably at his mother. And she started to get up and she wanted me. I know she did because I could feel it. She wasn't even thinking, not the way you and Daddy think. It was black. It was hurt, think, like the wasps that night in my room, only wanting to hurt, like the wasps. He swallowed and there was silence for a moment, all quiet while the image of the wasp sank into them. So I ran, Danny said. I ran, but the door was closed. I left it open, but it was closed. I didn't think about just opening it again and running out. I was scared. So I leaned against the door and closed my eyes and thought of how Mr. Halloran said the things here were just like pictures in a book, and if I kept saying to myself, "You're not there, go away, you're not there," she would go away. But it didn't work. His voice began to rise hysterically. She grabbed me, turned me around. I could see her eyes, how her eyes were, and she started to choke me. I could smell her. I could smell how dead she was. Stop now, shh, Wendy said, alarmed. Stop, Danny. It's all right. She was getting ready to go into her croon again. The Wendy Torrance all-purpose croon, patent pending. Let him finish, Jack said curtly. There isn't any more, Danny said. I passed out. Either because she was choking me or just because I was scared. When I came to, I was dreaming you and Mommy were fighting over me, and you wanted to do the bad thing again. Then I knew it wasn't a dream at all, and I was awake, and I wet my pants. I wet my pants like a baby. His head fell back against Wendy's sweater, and he began to cry with horrible weakness, his hands lying limp and spent in his lap. Jack got up. Take care of him. What are you going to do? Her face was full of dread. I'm going up to that room. What did you think I was gonna do? Have coffee? No, don't, Jack. Please don't. Wendy, if there's something else in the hotel, we have to know. Don't you dare leave us alone, she shrieked at him. Spittle flew from her lips with the force of her cry. Jack said, Wendy, that's a remarkable imitation of your mom. She burst into tears then, unable to cover her face because Danny was on her lap. I'm sorry, Jack said, but I have to, you know. I'm the goddamn caretaker. It's what I'm paid for. She only cried harder and he left her that way, going out of the kitchen, rubbing his mouth with his handkerchief as the door swung shut behind him. Don't worry, Mommy, Danny said. He'll be all right. He doesn't shine. Nothing here can hurt him. Through her tears, she said, No, I don't believe that. All right, that was some big stuff. Oh shit, Charlie's here. Hi, Charlie. How you doing, Charlie? What's going on, Charlie? I don't know if he's still here. That was like 10 minutes ago. Oh. Yeah, reading streams are not very conducive to like chat participation, unfortunately. Let me take a sip. That honey taste is still there. All right, let me take like one more. Yeah, I can't believe I just talked in an accent for nothing. Very, very, very sad. Okay. Oh shoot, I reveal. Here we go. Thank you, Impeach Eclair. Or Impeach Eclair. I always add an ED to the end of that for some reason. I need a tissue. My nose is getting stuffy. Oh, whoops. I just knocked my glasses over. My bad. Okay. Ugh. Okay. I think I'm good. Okay. Oh shoot, hiccups. Okay, I'm good. Yeah, I got big ol' eyes. Hell yeah. Chapter 30. 217 Revisited. He took the elevator up, and it was strange because none of them had used the elevator since they moved in. He threw the brass handle over and it wheezed vibratoriously up the shaft, the brass grate rattling madly. Wendy had a true claustrophobe's horror of the elevator, he knew. She envisioned the three of them trapped in it between floors while the winter storms raged outside. She could see them growing thinner and weaker, starving to death. Or perhaps dining on each other the way those rugby players had. He remembered a bumper sticker he'd seen in Boulder. Rugby players eat their own dead. He could think of others. You are what you eat. Or menu items. Welcome to the Overlook Dining Room, pride of the Rockies. Eaten splendor at the roof of the world. Human haunch boiled over matches, la spécialité de la maison. The contemptuous smile flickered over his features again. As the number 2 rose on the shaft wall, he threw the brass handle back to the home position, and the elevator car creaked to a stop. He took his Excedrin from his pocket, shook three of them into his hand, and opened the elevator door. Nothing in the Overlook frightened him. He felt that he and it were simpatico. He walked up the hall, flipping his Excedrin into his mouth and chewing them one by one. He rounded the corner into the short corridor off the main hall. The door to 217 was ajar, and the pass key hung from the lock on its white paddle. He frowned, feeling a wave of irritation and even real anger. Whatever had come of it, the boy had been trespassing. He had been told, and told bluntly, that certain areas of the hotel were off limits. The equipment shed, the basement, and all of the guest rooms. He would talk to Danny about that just as soon as the boy was over his fright. He would talk to him reasonably but sternly. There were plenty of fathers who would have done more than just talk. They would have administered a good shaking, and perhaps that was what Danny needed. If the boy had gotten a scare, wasn't that at least his just desserts? He walked down to the door, removed the pass key, dropped it into his pocket, and stepped inside. The overhead light was on. He glanced at the bed, saw it was not rumpled, and then walked directly across to the bathroom door. A curious certainty had grown in him. Although Watson had mentioned no names or room numbers, Jack felt sure that this was the room the lawyer's wife and her stud had shared, that this was the bathroom where she had been found dead, full of barbiturates and Colorado lounge booze. He pushed the mirror-backed bathroom door open and stepped through. The light in here was off. He turned it on and observed the long Pullman car room, furnished in the distinctive early 1900s remodeled in the 20s style that seemed common to all Overlook bathrooms, except for the ones on the third floor. Those were properly Byzantine, as befitted the royalty, politicians, movie stars, and capos, who'd stayed there over the years. The shower curtain, a pallid pastel pink, was drawn protectively around the long claw-footed tub. Nevertheless, they did move. And for the first time, he felt his new sense of sureness, almost cockiness, that had come over him when Danny ran to him shouting, it was her, deserting him. A chilled finger pressed gently against the base of his spine, cooling him off 10 degrees. It was joined by others, and they suddenly rippled all the way up his back to his medulla oblongata, playing his spine like a jungle instrument. His anger at Danny evaporated, and as he stepped forward and pushed the shower curtain back, his mouth was dry, and he felt only sympathy for his son and terror for himself. The tub was dry and empty. Relief and irritation vented in a sudden pah sound that escaped his compressed lips like a very small explosive. The tub had been scrubbed clean at the end of the season. Except for the rust stain under the twin faucets, it sparkled. There was a faint but definable smell of cleanser, the kind that can irritate your nose with the smell of its own righteousness for weeks, even months, after it's been used. He bent down and ran his fingertips along the bottom of the tub, dry as a bone, not even a hint of moisture. The boy had been either hallucinating or outright lying. He felt angry again. It was when the bath mat on the floor caught his attention. He frowned down at it. What was a bath mat doing in here? It should be in the linen cupboard at the end of the wing, with the rest of the sheets and towels and pillow slips. All the linen was supposed to be there. Not even the beds were really made up in these guest rooms. The mattresses had been zipped into clear plastic and then covered with bedspreads. He supposed Danny might have gone down and gotten it. The passkey would open the linen cupboard. But why? My mouth's getting dry. He brushed the tips of his fingers back and forth across it. The bath mat was bone dry. He went back to the bathroom door and stood in it. Everything was all right. The boy had been dreaming. There was not a thing out of place. I need a drink real quick. My mouth's getting dry. It was a little puzzling about the bath mat, granted, but the logical explanation was that some chambermaid hurrying like mad on the last day of the season had just forgotten to pick it up. Other than that, everything was... His nostrils flared a little. Disinfectant, that self-righteous smell, cleaner than thou, and soap? Surely not. But once the smell had been identified, it was too clear to dismiss. Soap. And not one of those postcard-sized bars of ivory they provide you with in hotels and motels either. The scent was light and perfumed, a lady's soap. It had a pink sort of smell. Camay or Lola? The brand that Wendy had always used in Stovington. It's nothing. It's your imagination. Yes, like the hedges, nevertheless they did move. They did not move. He crossed jerkily to the door which gave on the hall, feeling the irregular thump of a headache beginning in his temples. Too much had happened today. Too much by far. He wouldn't spank the boy or shake him, just talk to him. But by God, he wasn't going to add room 217 to his problems. Not on the basis of a dry bath mat and the faint smell of Lola soap. There was a sudden rattling, metallic sound behind him. It came just as his hand closed around the doorknob, and an observer might have thought the brushed steel of the knob carried an electric charge. He jerked convulsively, eyes widening, other facial features drawing in, grimacing. Then he had control of himself a little anyway, and he let go of the doorknob and turned carefully around. His joints creaked. He began to walk back to the bathroom door, step by leaden step. The shower curtain, which he had pushed back to look into the tub, was now drawn. The metallic rattle, which had sounded to him like a stir of bones in a crypt, had been the curtain rings on the overhead bar. Jack stared at the curtain. His face felt as if it had been heavily waxed, all dead skin on the outside, live hot rivulets of fear on the inside. The way he had felt on the playground. There was something behind the pink plastic shower curtain. There was something in the tub. He could see it, ill-defined and obscure through the plastic, a nearly amorphous shape. It could have been anything, a trick of the light, the shadow of the shower attachment. A woman long dead and reclining in her bath, a bar of Lola in one stiffening hand as she waited patiently for whatever lover might come. Jack told himself to step forward boldly and rake the shower curtain back, to expose whatever might be there. Instead, he turned with jerky marionette strides, his heart whamming frightfully in his chest, and he went back to the bed/sitting room. The door to the hall was shut. He stared at it for a long, immobile second. He could taste his terror now. It was in the back of his throat like a taste of gone-over cherries. Ooh, this is getting good. Oh, I toggled it and then untoggled it by accident. Okay, back to this. He walked to the door with that same jerky stride and forced his fingers to curl around the knob. It won't open, but it did. He turned off the light with a fumbling gesture, stepped into the hall, and pulled the door shut without looking back. From inside, he seemed to hear an odd wet thumping sound, far off, dim, as if something had just scrambled belatedly out of the tub, as if to greet a caller, as if it had realized the caller was leaving before the social... Fucking plane. Jesus Christ. As if it had realized the caller was leaving before the social amenities had been completed, and so it was now rushing to the door, all purple and grinning, to invite the caller back inside, perhaps forever. Footsteps approaching the door, or only the heartbeat in his ears. He fumbled at the passkey. It seemed sludgy, unwilling to turn in the lock. He attacked the passkey. The tumblers suddenly fell and he stepped back against the... The tumblers suddenly fell and he stepped back against the corridor's far wall. Goddamn. My reading chops are a little rusty today. A little groan of relief escaping him. He closed his eyes and all the odd phrases began to parade around his head. It seemed there must have been hundreds of them. Cracking up, not playing with a full deck, lost your marbles, guy just went Looney Tunes. He went up and over the high side, went bananas, lost his football crackers, nuts, half a sea bag. All meaning the same thing, losing your mind. No, he whimpered, hardly aware that he had been reduced to this, whimpering with his eyes shut like a child. Oh no, God, please, God, no. But below the tumble of his chaotic thoughts, below the trip hammer beat of his heart, he could hear the soft and futile sound of the doorknob being turned to and fro as something locked in tried helplessly to get out. Something that wanted to meet him. Something that would like to be introduced to his family as the storm shrieked around them and white daylight became black night. If he opened his eyes and saw that doorknob moving, he would go mad. So he kept them shut, and after an unknowable time, there was stillness. Jack forced himself to open his eyes, half convinced that when he did, she would be standing before him. But the hall was empty. He felt watched just the same. He looked at the people in the center of the door, and wondered what would happen if he approached it, stared into it. What would he be eyeball to eyeball with? His feet were moving. Feet don't fail me now. Before he realized it, he turned them away from the door and walked down to the main hall, his feet whispering on the blue-black jungle carpet. He stopped halfway to the stairs and looked at the fire extinguisher. He thought that the folds of canvas were arranged in a slightly different manner, and he was quite sure that the brass nozzle had been pointing toward the elevator when he came up the hall. Now it was pointing the other way. I didn't see that at all, Jack Torrance said quite clearly. His face was white and haggard, and his mouth kept trying to grin. But he didn't take the elevator back down. It was too much like an open mouth. Too much by half. He took the stairs. Hell yeah, we're really getting to the good part today. I like it. Oh, it's another like 1-page chapter ahead. Okay, let me just knock this out before I get my tea. Chapter 31, The Verdict. He stepped into the kitchen and looked at them, bouncing the passkey a few inches up off his left hand, making the chain on the white metal tongue jingle, then catching it again. Danny was pallid and worn out. Wendy had been crying, he saw. Her eyes were red and darkly circled. He felt a sudden burst of gladness at this. He wasn't suffering alone, that was sure. They looked at him without speaking. Nothing there, he said, astounded by the heartiness of his own voice. Not a thing. He bounced the passkey up and down, smiling reassuringly at them, watching the relief spread over their faces, and thought he had never in his life wanted a drink so badly as he did right now. Hey, got that out of the way, didn't we? Okay. Trying to think what I want to do with my tea. Kind of odd for that bit to get its own chapter. Yeah, that's a weird thing with Stephen King novels. Sometimes like there will be a chapter that's just like a page or two long, and again with the planes, really, like right now, we really had to do this right now. Like we couldn't wait like another like hour or two. We had to do this right now. Anyways, it seems like it's going past again. But anyways, as I was saying, I think he like puts these things into their own like individual like very short chapters, just to like give it that extra sense of impact, I guess, for lack of a better term. It's an interesting writing style nonetheless. Okay. I think... Let me take a sip of water. He's a weirdo. Yeah, real he's a little freak to be sure. For sure. Okay. Chapter 32, the bedroom. Honestly, I feel like right now it's probably time to take this off until we need it again. We'll bust it out again once we get to a real scary scene. Chapter 32, the bedroom. Later that afternoon, Jack got a cot from the first floor storage room and put it in the corner of their bedroom. Wendy had expected that the boy would be half the night getting to sleep, but Danny was nodding before... Really, dude? Get the fuck out of here. No one likes you. Revving your fucking car, you're so cool. But Danny was nodding before the Waltons was half over, and 15 minutes after they had tucked him in... 15 minutes after they had tucked him in, he was far down in sleep, moveless, one hand tucked under his cheek. Wendy sat watching him, holding her place in a fat paperback copy of Cashel Mara with one finger. Jack sat at his desk looking at his play. "Oh shit," Jack said. Wendy looked up from her contemplation of Danny. "What?" "Nothing." He looked down at the play with smoldering ill temper. How could he have thought it was good? It was puerile. I guess that's how you say it. It had been done 1,000 times. Worse, he had no idea how to finish it. Once it had seemed simple enough. Denker, in a fit of rage, seizes the poker from beside the fireplace and beats saintly Gary to death. Then, standing spread-legged over the body, the bloody poker in one hand, he screams at the audience, "It's here somewhere, and I will find it." Then, as the lights dim and the curtain is slowly drawn, the audience sees Gary's body face... I was like misreading that. The audience sees Gary's body face down on the forestage as Denker strides to the upstage bookcase and feverishly begins pulling books from the shelves, looking at them, throwing them aside. He had thought it was something old enough to be new, a play whose novelty alone might be enough to see it through a successful Broadway run. The shit I have to deal with in this neighborhood, Jesus Christ. A tragedy in 5 acts. But in addition to his sudden diversion of interest to the Overlook's history, something else had happened. He had developed opposing feelings about his characters. This was something quite new. Ordinarily, he liked all of his characters, the good and the bad. He was glad he did. It allowed him to try to see all of their sides and understand their motivations more clearly. His favorite story, sold to a small Southern Maine magazine called Contraband for Copies, had been a piece called The Monkey Is Here, pulled along. It had been about a child molester about to commit suicide in his furnished room. The child molester's name had been pulled along, Monkey to his friends. Jack had liked Monkey very much. He sympathized with Monkey's bizarre needs, knowing that Monkey was not the only one to blame for the 3 rape murders in his past. There had been bad parents, the father a beater as his own father had been, the mother a limp and silent dish rag as his mother had been, a homosexual experience in grammar school, public humiliation, worse experiences in high school and college, another fucking plane. I'm just gonna sit until it goes by. Ain't that a tragedy? He had been arrested and sent to an institution after exposing himself to a pair of little girls getting off a school bus. Okay, it's getting questionable. Worst of all, he had been dismissed from the institution, let back onto the streets because the man in charge had decided he was all right. The man's name had been Grimmer. Grimmer had known that Monkey DeLong was exhibiting deviant symptoms, but he'd written the good hopeful report and had let him go anyway. Jack liked and sympathized with Grimmer, too. Grimmer had to run an understaffed and underfunded institution and try to keep the whole thing together with spit, baling wire, and nickel and dime appropriations from a state legislature who had to go back and face the voters. Grimmer knew that Monkey could interact with other people, that he did not soil his pants or try to stab his fellow inmates with the scissors. He did not think he was Napoleon. The staff psychiatrist in charge of Monkey's case thought there was a better than even chance that Monkey could make it on the street, and they both knew that the longer a man is in an institution, the more he comes to need that closed environment, like a junkie with a smack. And meanwhile, people were knocking down the doors. Paranoids, schizoids, cycloids, semi-catatonics, men who claimed to have gone to heaven in flying saucers, women who had burned their children's areas off with Bic lighters, alcoholics, pyromaniacs, kleptomaniacs, manic depressives, suicidals. Tough old world, baby. If you're not bolted together tightly, you're gonna shake, rattle, and roll before you turn 30. Jack could sympathize with Grimmer's problem. He could sympathize with the parents of the murder victims, with the murdered children themselves, of course, and with Monkey DeLong. Let the reader lay blame. In those days, he hadn't wanted to judge. The cloak of the moralist sat badly on his shoulders. He had started the little school in the same optimistic vein, but lately he had begun to choose up sides, and worse still, he had come to loathe his hero, Gary Benson. Originally conceived as a bright boy more cursed with money than blessed with it. A boy who wanted more than anything to compile a good record so he could go to a good university. Because he had earned admission and not because his father had pulled strings. He had become to Jack a kind of simpering goody two-shoes, a postulant before the altar of knowledge rather than a simple acolyte, or sincere acolyte, an outward paragon of Boy Scout virtues, inwardly cynical, filled not with real brilliance, as he had first been conceived, but only with sly animal cunning. And although the play he unfailingly addressed Denker as Sir, all through the play he unfailingly addressed Denker as Sir, just as Jack had taught his own son to address those older and those in authority as Sir. He thought that Danny used the word quite sincerely, and Gary Benson, as originally conceived, had too. But as he had begun Act 5, it had come more and more strongly to him that Gary was using the word satirically, outwardly straight-faced, while the Gary Benson inside was mugging and leering at Denker. Denker, who had never had any of the things Gary had. Denker, who had had to work all his life just to become the head of a single little school. Who was now faced with ruin over this handsome, innocent-seeming rich boy who had cheated on his final composition and had then cunningly covered his tracks. Jack had seen Denker, the teacher, as not much different from the strutting South American Little Caesars in their banana kingdoms, standing dissidents up against a wall of the handiest squash or handball court. A super zealot in a comparatively small puddle, a man whose every whim becomes a crusade. In the beginning, he wanted to use his play as a microcosm to say something about the abuse of power. Now he tended more and more to see Denker as a Mr. Chips figure, and the tragedy was not the intellectual racking of Gary Benson, but rather the destruction of a kindly old teacher and headmaster, unable to see through the cynical wiles of his monster masquerading as a boy. He hadn't been able to finish the play, and here comes yet another plane. Isn't that nice? Isn't that great? This shit is becoming like a fucking sitcom, I swear to God. I can't have anything. I gotta call the airport. You gotta push these flights back, it's important. Okay. He hadn't been able to finish the play. Now he sat looking down at it, scowling, wondering if there was any way he could salvage the situation. I gotta take a sip. Okay. He didn't really think there was. He had begun one play and it had somehow turned into another. Presto changeo. Well, what the hell? Either way, it had been done before. Either way, it was a load of shit. And why was he driving himself crazy about it tonight anyway? After the day just gone by, it was no wonder he couldn't think straight. Get him down? He looked up, trying to blink the cobwebs away. Huh? I said, how are we going to get him down? We've got to get him out of here, Jack. For a moment, his wits were so scattered that he wasn't even sure what she was talking about. Then he realized and uttered a short, barking laugh. You say that as if it were so easy. I didn't mean. No problem, Wendy. I'll just change clothes in that telephone booth down in the lobby and fly him to Denver on my back. Superman Jack Torrance, they called me in my salad days. Her face registered slow hurt. I understand the problem, Jack. The radio is broken, the snow. But you've got to understand Danny's problem. My God, don't you? He was nearly catatonic, Jack. What if he hadn't come out of that? But he did, Jack said, a trifle shortly. He had been frightened at Danny's blank-eyed, slack-faced state, too. Of course he had. At first. But the more he thought about it, the more he wondered if it hadn't been a piece of play acting put on to escape his punishment. He had, after all, been trespassing. All the same, she said. She came to him and sat on the end of the bed. The end of the bed by his desk. Her face was both surprised and worried. Jack, the bruises on his neck. Something got at him, and I want him away from it. Don't shout, he said. My head aches, Wendy. I'm worried about this as you are, so please, don't shout. All right, she said, lowering her voice. I won't shout. But I don't understand you, Jack. Something's in here with us. And not a very nice someone someone is in here with us. Not a very nice someone either. We have to get down to Sidewinder. Not just Danny, but all of us. Quickly. And you're sitting there reading your play. We have to get down, we have to get down. You keep saying that. You must think I really am Superman. I think you're my husband, she said softly, and looked down at her hands. His temper flared. He slammed the play script down, knocking the edges of the pile out of True again and crumpling the sheets on the bottom. It's time you got some of the home truths into you, Wendy. You don't seem to have internalized them, as the sociologists say. They're knocking around up in your head like a bunch of loose cue balls. You need to shoot them into the pockets. You need to understand that we are snowed in. Danny had suddenly become active in his bed. Still sleeping, he had begun to twist and turn, the way he always did when we fought, Wendy thought dismally. And we're doing it again. Don't wake him up, Jack, please. He glanced over at Danny and some of the flush went out of his cheeks. Okay, I'm sorry. I'm sorry I sounded mad, Wendy. It's not really for you. But I broke the radio. If it's anybody's fault, it's mine. That was our big link to the outside. Ollie Ollie in for free. Please come get us, Mr. Ranger. We can't stay out this late. Don't, she said and put a hand on his shoulder. He leaned his head against it. She brushed his hair with her other hand. I guess you've got it right after what I accused you of. Sometimes I am like my mother. I can be a bitch. But you have to understand that some things are hard to get over. You have to understand that. Do you mean his arms? His lips had thinned. Yes, Wendy said, and then she rushed on. But it's not just you. I worry when he goes out to play. I worry about him wanting a two-wheeler next year, even one with training wheels. I worry about his teeth and his eyesight, and about this thing, what he calls his shine. I worry because he's little and he seems very fragile, and because something in this hotel seems to want him. And it will go through us to get him if it has to. That's why we must get him out, Jack. I know that. I feel that. We must get him out. Her hand tightened painfully on his shoulder in her agitation, but he didn't move away. One hand fought the firm weight of her left breast and began to stroke it through her shirt. One hand found the firm weight. Okay, well, I misread that, my bad. Wendy, he said, and stopped. She waited for him to rearrange whatever he had to say. His strong hand on her breast felt good, soothing. Stop talking about the breast, please. I could snowshoe him down. He could walk part of the way himself, but I would mostly have to carry him. It would mean camping out 1, 2, maybe 3 nights. That would mean building a travois to carry the supplies and bedrolls on. We have the AM/FM radio, so we could pick a day when the weather forecast called for a 3-day spell of good weather. But if the forecast was wrong, he finished, his voice soft and measured, I think we might die. Her face had paled. It looked shiny, almost ghostly. He continued to stroke her breast, and then there's some other stuff I don't want to repeat out loud. She made a soft sound from his words or in reaction to his gentle pressure on her breast. He couldn't tell. He raised his hand slightly and undid the top button of her shirt. Oh no, I don't know if I like where this is going. Wendy shifted her legs slightly. All at once her jeans seemed too tight, slightly irritating in a pleasant sort of way. It would mean leaving you alone because you can't snowshoe with beans. It would be maybe 3 days of not knowing. Would you want that? His hand dropped to the second button, slipped it, and the beginning of her cleavage was exposed. Okay, let me like skim through this because I don't want to read like pornography on stream. Let me see. Okay. Yeah, I think I might have to skip this. Yeah, I can't. I don't think I can read this on stream. This might be violating TOS. But yeah, that's pornography. Okay, we're just gonna skip that. Okay. So they were basically, from what I gathered, they were just like discussing the plan and all that. After, with no light burning in the room but the nightlight that Danny had brought with him from his room, she lay in the crook of his arm, feeling deliciously at peace. Also, one thing that we're just kind of glossing over here. They're doing that with their son in the room. I don't like that. That's sus. That's awful sus. I don't like it. No, sir. She found it hard to believe they could be sharing the Overlook with a murderous stowaway. Jack, what got at him? He didn't answer her directly. He does have something. Some talent that the rest of us are missing. The most of us, beg pardon. And maybe the Overlook has something too. Ghosts? I don't know. Not in the Algernon Blackwood sense, that's for sure. More like the residues of the feelings of the people who've stayed here. Good things and bad things. In that sense, I suppose that every big hotel has got its ghosts. Especially the old ones. Let me take a sip. My tongue's starting to hurt. But a dead woman in the tub. Jack, he's not losing his mind, is he? He gave her a brief squeeze. Thankfully, not on the chest this time. We know he goes into, well, trances, for want of a better word, from time to time. We know that when he's in them, he sometimes sees things he doesn't understand. If precognitive trances are possible, they are probably functions of the subconscious mind. Freud said that the subconscious never speaks to us in literal language, only in symbols. If you dream about being in a bakery where no one speaks English, you may be worried about your ability to support your family. Or maybe just that no one understands you. I've read that the falling dream is a standard outlet for feelings of insecurity. Games, little games. Conscious on one side of the net, subconscious on the other, serving some cockamamie image back and forth. Same with mental illness, with hunches, all of that. Why should precognition be any different? Maybe Danny really did see blood all over the walls of the presidential suite. To a kid his age, the image of blood and the concept of death are nearly interchangeable. To kids, the image is always more accessible than the concept anyway. William Carlos Williams knew that. He was a pediatrician. When we grow up, concepts gradually get easier, and we leave the images to the poets. And I'm just rambling on. I like to hear you ramble. She said it, folks. She said it. You all heard it. The marks on his neck, Jack, those are real. Yes. There was nothing else for a long time. She had begun to think he must have gone to sleep, and she was slipping into a drowse herself when he said, I can think of 2 explanations for those, and neither of them involve a fourth party in the hotel. What? She came up on one elbow. Stigmata, maybe, he said. Stigmata? Isn't that when people bleed on Good Friday or something? Yes. Sometimes people who believe deeply in Christ's divinity exhibit bleeding marks on their hands and feet during the Holy Week. It was much more common in the Middle Ages than now. In those days, such people were considered blessed by God. I don't think the Catholic Church proclaimed any of it as out-and-out miracles, which was pretty smart of them. Stigmata is much different from some of the things the yogis can do. Or, I don't know how to pronounce that. I'm assuming that's how it is. It's better understood now, that's all. The people who understand the interaction between the mind and the body, study it, no one understands it, believe we have a lot more control over our involuntary functions than they used to think. You can slow your heartbeat if you think about it enough. Speed up your own metabolism, make yourself sweat more, or make yourself bleed. You think Danny thought those bruises onto his neck? Jack, I just can't believe that. I can believe it's possible, although it seems unlikely to me too. What's more likely is that he did it to himself. To himself? He's gone into these trances and hurt himself in the past. You remember the time at the supper table? About 2 years ago, I think. We were super pissed at each other. Nobody talking very much. Then, all at once, his eyes rolled up into his head and he went face first into his dinner. Then onto the floor, remember? Yes, she said. I sure do. I thought he was having a kind of convulsion. Another time we were in the park, he said. Just Danny and I. Saturday afternoon. He was sitting on a swing, coasting back and forth. He collapsed onto the ground. It was like he'd been shot. I ran over and picked him up, and all of a sudden he just came around. He sort of blinked at me and said, I hurt my tummy. Tell Mommy to close the bedroom windows if it rains. And that night it rained like hell. Yes, but... And he's always coming in with cuts and scraped elbows. His shins look like a battlefield in distress. And when you ask him how he got this or that one, he always says, "Oh, I was just playing," and that's the end of it. Jack, all kids get bumped and bruised up. With little boys, it's almost constant from the time they learn to walk until they're 12 or 13. And I'm sure Danny gets his share, Jack responded. He's an active kid. But I remember that day in the park and that night at the supper table. And I wonder if some of our kids' bumps and bruises come from just keeling over. That Dr. Edmonds said Danny did it right in his office, for Christ's sake. All right, but those bruises were fingers. I'd swear to it. He didn't get them falling down. He goes into a trance, Jack said. Maybe he sees something that happened in that room. An argument, maybe a suicide, violent emotions. It isn't like watching a movie. He's in a highly suggestible state. He's right in the damn thing. His subconscious is maybe visualizing whatever happened in a symbolic way. As a dead woman who's alive again. Zombie, undead, ghoul, you pick your term. You're giving me goosebumps, she said thickly. I'm giving myself a few. I'm no psychiatrist, but it seems to fit so well. The walking dead woman as a symbol for dead emotions, dead lives that just won't give up and go away. But because she's a subconscious figure, she's also him. In the trance state, the conscious Danny is submerged. The subconscious figure is pulling the strings. So Danny put his hands around his own neck and... Stop, she said. I get the picture. I think that's more frightening than having a stranger creeping around the halls, Jack. You can move away from a stranger. You can't move away from yourself. You're talking about schizophrenia. Of a very limited type, he said, but a trifle uneasily. And of a very special nature. Because he does seem to read thoughts, and he really does seem to have precognitive flashes from time to time. I can't think of that as mental illness no matter how hard I try. We all have schizo deposits in us anyway. I think as Danny gets older, he'll get this under control. If you're right, then it's imperative that we get him out. Whatever he has, his hotel's making it worse. I wouldn't say that, he objected. If he'd done as he was told, he never would have gone up to that room in the first place. It never would have happened. My God, Jack, are you implying that him being half strangled was a fitting punishment for being off limits? No, of course not, but... No but, she said, shaking her head violently. The truth is, we're guessing. We don't have any idea where he might turn a corner and run into one of those air pockets, one reel horror movies, whatever they are. We have to get him away. She laughed a little in the darkness. Next thing, we'll be seeing things. Don't talk nonsense, he said. And in the darkness of the room, he saw the hedge lines bunching around the path, no longer flanking it, but guarding it. Hungry November lions. Cold sweat sprang out of his brow. You didn't really see anything, did you? She was asking. I mean, when you went up to that room, you didn't see anything? The lions were gone. Now he saw a pink pastel shower curtain with a dark shape lounging behind it. The closed doors, that muffled, hurried thump, and the sounds after it that might have been running footsteps. The horrible lurching beat of his own heart as he struggled with the passkey. Nothing, he said, and that was true. He had been strung up, not sure of what was happening. He hadn't had a chance to sift through his thoughts for a reasonable explanation concerning the bruises on its son's neck. He had been pretty damn suggestible himself. Hallucinations could sometimes be catching. And you haven't changed your mind? About the snowmobile, I mean? His hands clamped into sudden tight fists. Stop nagging me, by his sides. I said I would, didn't I? I will. Now go to sleep. It's been a long, hard day. And how, she said. There was a rustle of bedclothes as she turned toward him and kissed his shoulder. I love you, Jack. I love you too, he said, but he was only mouthing the words. His hands were still clenched into fists. They felt like rocks on the ends of his arms. The pulse beat prominently in his forehead. She hadn't said a word about what was going to happen to them after they got down, when the party was over. Not one word. It had been Danny this and Danny that, and Jack I'm so scared. Oh yes, she was scared of a lot of closet boogeymen and jumping shadows, plenty scared. Okay, let me take a sip. This is like a big fucking chapter. Oh my god, it just goes on and on forever. Okay, let me find my place again. Okay. Alright. But there were no lack of real ones either. When they got down to Sidewinder, they would arrive with $60 and the clothes they stood up in. Not even a car. Even if Sidewinder had a pawn shop, which it didn't, they had nothing to hawk but Wendy's $90 diamond engagement ring and the Sony AM/FM radio. A pawnbroker might give them $20, a kind pawnbroker. There would be no job, not even part-time or seasonal, except maybe shoveling out driveways for $3 a shot. The picture of John Torrance, 30 years old, who had once published in Esquire and who had harbored dreams, not at all unreasonable dreams, he felt, of becoming a major American writer during the next decade, with a shovel from the Sidewinder Western Auto on his shoulder, ringing doorbells. That picture suddenly came to him much more clearly than the headlines, and he clenched his fists tighter still, feeling the fingernails sink into his palms and draw blood in mystic quarter moon shapes. John Torrance, standing in line to change his $60 into food stamps, standing in line again at the Sidewinder Methodist Church to get donated commodities and dirty looks from the locals. John Torrance explaining to Al that they just had to leave, had to shut down the boiler, had to leave the Overlook and all it contained, open to vandals or thieves on snow machines, because you see, Al, attendez-vous, Al, there are ghosts up there, and they have it in for my boy. Goodbye, Al. Thoughts of Chapter 4. Spring comes for Jack Torrance. What then? Whatever then? They might be able to get up to the West Coast in the VW, he supposed. A new fuel pump would do it. 50 miles west of here and it was all downhill. You could damn near put the bug in neutral and coast to Utah. On to sunny California, land of oranges and opportunity. A man with a sterling record of alcoholism, student beating, and ghost chasing would undoubtedly be able to write his own ticket. Anything you like. Custodial engineer, swamping out Greyhound buses, the automotive business, washing cars in a rubber suit. The culinary arts, perhaps, washing dishes in a diner. Or possibly a more responsible position such as pumping gas. A job like that even helped the intellectual stimulation of making change and writing out credit slips. I can give you 25 hours a week at the minimum wage. That was heavy tunes in a year when Wonder Bread went down. That was a heavy tunes in a year when Wonder Bread went for 60 cents a loaf. Blood had begun to trickle down from his palms. Like stigmata, oh yes. He squeezed tighter, savaging himself with pain. His wife was asleep behind him. Why not? There were no problems. He had agreed to take her and Danny away from the big bad boogeymen, and there were no problems. So you see, Al, I thought the best thing to do would be to kill her. The thought rose up from nowhere, naked and unadorned. The urge to tumble her out of bed, naked, bewildered, just beginning to wake up, to pounce on her, seize her neck like the green limb of a young aspen, and to throttle her, thumbs on windpipe, fingers pressing against the top of her spine, jerking her head up and ramming it back down against the floorboards, again and again, whamming, whacking, smashing, crashing. Jitter and jive, baby. Shake, rattle, and roll. He would make her take her medicine. Every drop. every last bitter drop. He was dimly aware of a muffled noise somewhere, just outside his hot and racing inner world. He looked across the room and Danny was thrashing again, twisting in his bed and rumpling the blankets. The boy was moaning deep in his throat, a small caged sound. What nightmare? A purple woman long dead, shambling after him down twisting hotel corridors. Somehow he didn't think so. Something else chased Danny in his dreams, something worse. The bitter shock of his emotions was broken. He got out of bed and went across to the boy, feeling sick and ashamed of himself. It was Danny he had to think of, not Wendy, not himself, only Danny. And no matter what shape he wrestled the facts into, he knew in his heart that Danny must be taken out. He straightened the boy's blankets and added the quilt from the top of the bed. Danny had quieted again now. Jack touched the sleeping forehead. What monster is capering just behind that ridge of bone? And found it warm, but not overly so. And he was sleeping peacefully again. Queer. He got back into bed and tried to sleep. It eluded him. It was so unfair that things should turn out this way. Bad luck seemed to stalk them. They hadn't been able to shake it by coming up here after all. By the time they arrived in Sidewinder tomorrow afternoon, the golden opportunity would have evaporated. Gone the way of the blue suede shoe, as an old roommate of his had been wont to say. Consider the difference if they didn't go down. If they could somehow stick it out, the play would be finished. One way or the other, he would tack an ending onto it. His own uncertainty about his characters might add an appealing touch of ambiguity to his original ending. Perhaps it would even make him some money. It wasn't impossible. Even lacking that, Al might well convince the Stovington board to rehire him. He would be on pro, of course, maybe for as long as 3 years. But if he could stay sober and keep writing, he might not have to stay at Stovington for 3 years. Of course, he hadn't cared much for Stovington before. He'd felt stifled, buried alive, but that had been an immature reaction. Furthermore, how much could a man enjoy teaching when he went through his first 3 classes with a skull-busting hangover every second or third day? It wouldn't be that way again. He would be sure to handle his responsibilities much better. He was sure of it. Somewhere in the midst of that night, things began to break up, and he drifted down to sleep. His last thought followed him down like a sounding bell. It seemed that he might be able to find peace here. At last, if they would only let him. When he woke up, he was standing in the bathroom of 217. Began walking in my sleep again. Why? No radios to break up here. The bathroom light was on, the room behind him in darkness. The shower curtain was drawn around the long claw-footed tub. The bath mat beside it was wrinkled and wet. He began to feel afraid. But the very dreamlike quality of his fear told him this was not real. Yet that could not contain the fear. So many things at the Overlook seemed like dreams. Hold on. Let me like get some tea. Because this is a very long chapter, and I need some like help, for lack of a better term. I think you can hear my throat's already like gone. I think this is gonna be like a 2-hour sort of thing, and then we'll probably wrap it up. Because I am not used to talking this long. I've spent all my endurance with silence. Okay, let's see. He moved across the floor to the tub, not wanting to, but helpless to turn his feet back. He flung the curtain open. Lying in the tub, naked, lolling almost naked in lying in the tub naked, lolling almost weightless in the water, was George Hatfield, a knife stuck in his chest. The water around him was stained a bright pink. George's eyes were closed. His other body part floated limply like kelp. George, he felt himself say. At the word, George's eyes snapped open again. They were silver, not human eyes at all. George's hands, fish white, found the sides of the tub, and he pulled himself up to a sitting position. The knife stuck straight out of his chest, equidistantly placed between nipples. The wound was lipless. You set the timer ahead, Silver-Eyed George told him. No, George, I didn't. I don't stutter. George was standing now, still fixing him with that inhuman silver glare, but his mouth had drawn back in a dead and grimacing smile. He threw one leg over the porcelain side of the tub. One white and wrinkled foot placed itself on the bath mat. First you tried to run me over on my bike, and then you set the timer ahead, and then you tried to stab me to death, but I still don't stutter. George was coming for him, his hands out, the fingers slightly curled. He smelled moldy and wet, like leaves that had been rained on. It was for your own good, Jack said, backing up. I set it ahead for your own good. Furthermore, I happen to know you cheated on your final composition. I didn't cheat, and I don't stutter. George's hands touched his neck. Jack turned and ran with the floating, weightless slowness that is so common in dreams, or so common to dreams. You did cheat, he screamed in fear and anger as he crossed the darkened bed/sitting room. I'll prove it. George's hands were on his neck again. Jack's heart swelled with fear until he was sure it would burst. And then at last his hand curled around the doorknob and it turned under his hand, and he yanked the door open. He plunged out, not into the second-floor hallway, but into the basement room beyond the arch. The cobwebby light was on. His camp chair, stark and geometrical, stood beneath it. And all around it was a miniature mountain range of boxes and crates and banded bundles of records and invoices and God knew what. Relief surged through him. I'll find it, he heard himself screaming. He seized a damp and moldering cardboard box. It split apart in his hands, spilling out a waterfall of yellowed flimsies. It's here somewhere. I will find it. He plunged his hands deep into the pile of papers and came up with a dry, papery wasp's nest in one hand and a timer in the other. The timer was ticking. Attached to its back was a length of electrical cord, and attached to the other end of the cord was a bundle of dynamite. Here, he screamed. Here, take it. His relief became absolute triumph. He had done more than escape George. He had conquered. With these talismanic objects in his hands, George would never touch him again. George would flee in terror. He began to turn so he could confront George, and that was when George's hands settled around his neck, squeezing, stopping his breath, damming up his respiration entirely after one final dragging gasp. I don't stutter, whispered George from behind him. He dropped the wasp's nest, and wasps boiled out of it in a furious brown and yellow wave. His lungs were on fire. His wavering sight fell on the timer, and the sense of triumph returned, along with a cresting wave of righteous wrath. Instead of connecting the timer to dynamite, the cord ran to the gold knob of a stout black cane, like the one his father had carried after the incident with the milk truck. He grasped it, and the cord parted. The cane felt heavy and right in his hands. He swung it back over his shoulder. On the way up, it glanced against the wire from which the light bulb depended, and the light began to swing back and forth, making the room's hooded shadows rock monstrously against the floor and walls. On the way down, the cane struck something much harder. George screamed. The grip on Jack's throat loosened. He tore it free of George's grip and whirled. George was on his knees, his head drooping, his hands laced together on top of it. Blood welled from his fingers. "Please," George whispered humbly. "Give me a break, Mr. Torrance." Now you'll take your medicine," Jack grunted. "Now by God, won't you, young pup, young worthless cur? Now by God, right now, every drop, every single drop." As the light swayed above him and the shadows danced and flapped, he began to swing the cane, bringing it down again and again, his arm raising and falling like a machine. George's bloody, protecting fingers fell away from his head, and Jack brought the cane down again and again, and on his neck and shoulders and back and arms. Except that the cane was no longer precisely a cane. It seemed to be a mallet with some kind of brightly striped handle. A mallet with a hard side and a soft side. The business end was clotted with blood and hair, and the flat whacking sound of the mallet against flesh had been replaced with a hollow booming sound, echoing and reverberating. His own voice had taken on the same quality, bellowing, disembodied, and yet paradoxically it sounded weaker, slurred, petulant, as if he were drunk. The figure on its knees slowly raised its head, as if in supplication. There was not a face, precisely, but only a mask of blood through which eyes peered. He brought the mallet back for a final whistling downstroke, and it was fully launched before he saw that the supplicating face below him was not George's, but Danny's. It was the face of his son. "Daddy." And then the mallet crashed home, striking Danny right between the eyes, closing them forever. And something somewhere seemed to be laughing. No! It came out of it, standing naked over Danny's bed, his hands empty, his body sheened with sweat. His final scream had only been in his mind. He voiced it again, this time in a whisper. "No, no, Danny, never." He went back to bed on legs that had turned to rubber. Wendy was sleeping deeply. The clock on the nightstand said it was 5:15. He lay sleepless until 7, when Danny began to stir awake. Then he put his legs over the edge of the bed and began to dress. It was time to go downstairs and check the boiler. Boy, oh boy, what a chapter that was. Oh hey, now my toggles work when I'm not like in the window. Sometimes it's like 50-50 whether or not it works, so a lot of time I just like go ahead and open it again anyways, just to be sure. But yeah, we need to stop opening the shower curtains. It doesn't end good. From what we've seen, it never ends good. Okay, let's see. I'm gonna take a sip. Now let's see how long this next chapter is. Oh yeah, I feel like this next one's probably gonna be the final, because it's also kind of long. So I guess this is like our final push for the night. Let me take one more sip. Okay. Excuse me. My bad. Okay. Chapter 33. The Snowmobile. Sometime after midnight, while they all slept uneasily, the snow had stopped after dumping a fresh 8 inches on the old crust. The clouds had broken, a fresh wind had swept them away, and now Jack stood in a dusty ingot of sunlight, which slanted through the dirty window set into the eastern side of the equipment shed. Oh, excuse me. My bad. The place was about as long as a freight car, and about as high. It smelled of grease and oil and gasoline and faint nostalgic smell, sweet grass. 4 power lawnmowers were ranked like soldiers on review against the south wall, 2 of them the riding type that looked like small tractors. To the left were post-hole diggers, round-bladed shovels made for doing surgery on the putting green. A chainsaw. Oh gosh, that scared me. Little Beast Man, thank you for the follow. Much appreciated. A stretch break? Okay. I can always stretch a little bit. Okay. I'm good. Okay. Thank you. My voice is entering raspy mode. Snack break? I mean, I was gonna eat some dinner after the stream. Unfortunately, I don't have a snack. I mean, it's been a while since we had a snack break, so I kind of like forgot it was a thing. But I will have. You look like a star in a kids cartoon. Thank you. That's actually a very big compliment for me. That's exactly the vibe I was going for. But yeah, I'm gonna have some dinner after this. So that one's for you, my friend. Mwah. Thank you. I dedicate that dinner to you, Oedipus Reps. Okay, so where were we? A chainsaw, the electric hedge clippers, and a long, thin steel pole with a red flag at the top. Caddy, fetch my ball in under 10 seconds, and there's a quarter in it for you. Yes, sir. Against the eastern wall, where the morning sun slanted in most strongly, three ping pong tables leaned one against the other like a drunken house of cards. Their nets had been removed and flopped down from the shelf above. In the corner was a stack of shuffleboard weights and a roque set. The wickets banded together with twists of wire, the brightly painted balls and an egg carton sort of thing. Strange hens you have up here, Watson. Yes, and you should see the animals down on the front lawn. And the mallets, 2 sets of them, standing in their racks. He walked over to them, stepping over an old 8-cell battery, which had once sat beneath the hood of the hotel truck, no doubt, and a battery charger, and a pair of J.C. Penney jumper cables coiled between them. He slipped one of the short-handed mallets out of the front rack and held it up in front of his face, like a knight bound for battle saluting his king. My reading ability is like going down the train slowly. Fragments of his dream, it was all jumbled now, fading, recurred. Something about George Hatfield and his father's cane, just enough to make him uneasy and, absurdly enough, a trifle guilty about holding a plain old garden variety roque mallet. Not that roque was such a common garden variety game anymore. Its more modern cousin, croquet, was much more popular now, and a child's version of the game at that. Roque, however, that must have been quite a game. Jack had found a mildewed rule book down in the basement from one of the years in the early 20s, when a North American roque tournament had been held at the Overlook. Quite a game. Schizo. I didn't add that. I didn't add that, by the way. That's just like... It's just like a page break and then like... Or like a paragraph break and then schizo in parentheses. I like that. He frowned a little, then smiled. Yes, it was a schizo sort of game at that. The mallet expressed that perfectly. A soft end and a hard end. A game of finesse and aim. And a game of raw bludgeoning power. He swung the mallet through the air. He smiled a little at the powerful whistling sound it made. Then he replaced it in the rack and turned to his left. What he saw there made him frown again. The snowmobile sat almost in the middle of the equipment shed, a fairly new one, and Jack didn't care for its looks at all. Bombardier Skidoo was written on the side of the engine cowling, facing him in black letters, which had been raked backward, presumably to connotate speed. The protruding skis were also black. There was black piping to the right and left of the cowling, what they would call racing stripes on a sports car, but the actual paint job was a bright, sneering yellow, and that was what he didn't like about it. Sitting there in its shaft of morning sun, yellow body and black piping, black skis and black upholstered open cockpit. It looked like a monstrous mechanized wasp. When it was running, it would sound like that too, whining and buzzing and ready to sting. But then what else should it look like? It wasn't flying under false colors, at least. Because after it had done its job, they were going to be hurting plenty. All of them. By spring, the Torrance family would be hurting so badly that what those wasps had done to Danny's hand would look like a mother's kisses. He pulled his handkerchief from his back pocket, wiped his mouth with it, and walked over to the skidoo. He stood looking down at it, the frown very deep now, and stuffed his handkerchief back into his pocket. Outside, a sudden gust of wind slammed against the equipment shed, making it rock and creak. He looked out the window and saw the gust carrying a sheet of sparkling snow crystals toward the drifted-in rear of the hotel, whirling them high into the hard blue sky. The wind dropped and he went back to looking at the machine. It was a disgusting thing, really. You almost expected to see a long, limber stinger protruding from the rear of it. He had always disliked the goddamn snowmobiles. They shivered the cathedral silence of winter into a million rattling fragments. They startled the wildlife. They sent out huge and pollutive clouds of blue and billowing oil smoke behind them. Cough, cough, gag, gag, let me breathe. They were perhaps the final grotesque toy of the unwinding fossil fuel age, given to 10-year-olds at Christmas. He remembered a newspaper article he had read in Stovington. A story datelined someplace in Maine. A kid on a snowmobile barrel-assing up a road he'd never traveled before at better than 30 miles an hour. Night. His headlights off. There had been a heavy chain strung between two posts, with a no trespassing sign hung from the middle. They said that in all probability the kid never saw it. The moon might have gone behind a cloud. The chain had decapitated him. Reading the story, Jack had been almost glad. And now looking down at the machine, the feeling recurred. I wanted to say returned. If it wasn't for Danny, I would take great pleasure in grabbing one of those mallets, opening the cowling, and just pounding until he let his pent-up breath escape him in a long, slow sigh. Wendy was right. Come hell, high water, or the welfare line, Wendy was right. Pounding this machine to death would be the height of folly. No matter how unpleasant an aspect that folly made. It would no matter how pleasant an aspect that folly made. It would almost be tantamount to pounding his own son to death. Fucking Luddite, he said aloud. He went to the back of the machine and unscrewed the gas cap. I don't know why I added a T to that. He found a dipstick on one of the shelves that ran at chest height around the walls and slipped it in. The last eighth of an inch came out wet. Not very much, but enough to see if the damn thing would run. Later, he could siphon more from the Volks in the hotel truck. He screwed the cap back on and opened the cowling. No spark plugs, no battery. He went to the shelf again and began to poke along it, pushing along screwdrivers and adjustable wrenches, a one-lung carburetor that had been taken out of an old lawnmower, plastic boxes of screws and nails and bolts of varying sizes. The shelf was thick and dark with old grease, and the year's accumulation of dust had stuck to it like fur. He didn't like touching it. He found a small oil-stained box with the abbreviation SKID laconically marked on it in pencil. He shook it and something rattled inside. Plugs. He held one of them up to the light, trying to estimate the gap without hunting around for the gapping tool. Fuck it, he thought resentfully, and dropped the plug back into the box. If the gap's wrong, that's just too damn bad. Tough fucking titty. There was a stool behind the door. He dragged it over, sat down and installed the 4 spark plugs, then fitted the small rubber caps over each. That done, he let his fingers play briefly over the magneto. They laughed when I sat down at the piano. Back to the shelves. This time he couldn't find what he wanted, a small battery. A 3 or 4 cell. There were socket wrenches, a case filled with drills and drill bits, bags of lawn fertilizer, and Vigoro for the flower beds, but no snowmobile battery. It didn't bother him in the slightest. In fact, it made him feel glad. He was relieved. I did my best, Captain, but I could not get through. That's fine, son. I'm going to put you in for the Silver Star and the Purple Snowmobile. You're a credit to your regiment. Thank you, sir. I did try. He began to whistle Red River Valley up-tempo as he poked along the last 2 or 3 feet of shelf. The notes came out in little puffs of white smoke. He had made a complete circuit of his shed and the thing wasn't there. Maybe somebody had lifted it. Maybe Watson had. He laughed aloud. The old office bootleg trick. A few paper clips, a couple of reams of paper. Nobody will miss this tablecloth or this golden regal palace or place setting. And what about this fine snowmobile battery? Yes, that might come in handy. Toss it in the sack. White collar crime, baby. Everybody has sticky fingers. Under the jacket discount, we used to call it when we were kids. He walked back to the snowmobile and gave the side of it a good healthy kick as he went by. Well, that was the end of it. You would just have to tell Wendy sorry, baby, but... There was a box sitting in a corner by the door. The stool had been right over it. Written on the top in pencil was the abbreviation SKID. He looked at it, the smile drying up on his lips. Look, sir, it's the cavalry. Looks like your smoke signals must have worked after all. It wasn't fair. God... Oh, excuse me. Oh, that's unsightly. God damn it, it just wasn't fair. Something, luck, fate, providence, had been trying to save him. Some other luck, white luck. And at the last moment, bad old Jack Torrance's luck had stepped back in. The lousy run of cards wasn't over yet. Resentment, a gray, sullen wave of it, pushed up his throat. His hands had clenched into fists again. Not fair, goddammit, not fair. Why couldn't he have looked someplace else? Any place? Why hadn't he had a crick in his neck or an itch in his nose or the need to blink? Just one of those little things. He never would have seen it. Well, he hadn't, that was all. It was a hallucination, no different from what had happened yesterday outside the room on the 2nd floor, or the goddamn hedge menagerie. A momentary strain, that was all. Fancy, I thought I saw a snowmobile battery in that corner. Nothing there now. Combat fatigue, I guess, sir. Sorry. Keep your pecker up, son. It happens to all of us sooner or later. He yanked the door open almost hard enough to snap the hinges and pulled his snowshoes inside. They were clotted with snow and he slapped them down hard enough on the floor to raise a cloud of it. He put his left foot on the left shoe and paused. Danny was out there by the milk platform, trying to make a snowman by the looks. Not much luck. The snow was too cold to stick together. Still, he was giving it the old college try. Out there in the flashing morning, a speck of a bundled-up boy above the brilliant snow and below the brilliant sky. Wearing his hat turned around backward like Carlton Fisk. What in the name of God were you thinking of? The answer came back with no pause. Me. I was thinking of me. He suddenly remembered lying in bed the night before, lying there, and suddenly he had been contemplating the murder of his wife. In that instant, kneeling there, everything came clear to him. It was not just Danny the Overlook was working on. It was working on him, too. It wasn't Danny who was the weak link, it was him. He was the vulnerable one, the one who could be bent and twisted until something snapped, until I let go and sleep. And when I do that, if I do that, he looked up at the banks of windows, and the sun threw back an almost blinding glare from their many paned surfaces, but he looked anyway. For the first time, he noticed how much they seemed like eyes. They reflected away the sun and held their own darkness within. It was not Danny they were looking at. It was him. In those few seconds, he understood everything. There was a certain black and white picture he remembered seeing as a child in catechism? I think that's how you say it. In catechism class. The nun had presented it to them on an easel, and called it a miracle of God. The class had looked at it blankly, seeing nothing but a jumble of whites and blacks, senseless and patternless. Then one of the children in the third row gasped, "It's Jesus!" And that child had gone home with a brand new Testament and also a calendar because he had been first. The others stared even harder, Jack Torrance among them. One by one, the other kids had given a similar gasp. One little girl transported in near ecstasy, crying out shrilly, "I see him! I see him!" Oh, my throat's dry. She had also been rewarded with a testament. At last, everyone had seen the face of Jesus in the jumble of blacks and whites except Jackie. He strained harder and harder, scared now, part of him cynically thinking that everyone else was simply putting on to please Sister Beatrice. Part of him secretly convinced that he wasn't seeing it, because God had decided he was the worst sinner in the class. Hold on, I gotta take a sip. I pronounced it correctly? Oh, yeah. I don't think I've ever seen the word catechism in writing before, although I've heard it a couple times, I think. "Don't you see it, Jackie?" Sister Beatrice had asked. Sister Beatrice had asked him in her sad, sweet manner. "I see your breasts," he had thought in vicious desperation. That actually said a more vulgar word, but I did not say it. He began to shake his head, then faked excitement and said, "Yes, I do. Wow, it is Jesus." And everyone in class had laughed and applauded him, making him feel triumphant, ashamed, and scared. Later, when everyone else had tumbled their way up from the church basement and out onto the street, he lingered behind, looking at the meaningless black and white jumble that Sister Beatrice had left on the easel. He hated it. They had all made it up in the way he had, even Sister herself. It was all a big fake. "Shitfire, hellfire, shitfire," he had whispered under his breath. And as he turned to go, he had seen the face of Jesus from the corner of his eye, sad and wise. He turned back, his heart in his throat. Everything had suddenly clicked into place, and he had stared at the picture with fearful wonder, unable to believe he'd missed it. The eyes, the zigzag of shadow across the careworn brow, the fine nose, the compassionate lips, looking at Jackie Torrance. What had only been a meaningless sprawl had suddenly been transformed into a stark black and white etching of the face of Christ our Lord. Fearful wonder became terror. He had cussed in front of a picture of Jesus. He would be damned. He would be in hell with the sinners. The face of Christ had been in the picture all along. All along. Now, kneeling in the sun and watching his son playing in the shadow of the hotel, he knew that it was all true. The hotel wanted Danny. Maybe all of them, but Danny for sure. The Hedges had really walked. There was a dead woman in 217. A woman that was perhaps only a spirit and harmless under most circumstances. But a woman who was now in active danger. Like some malevolent clockwork toy, she had been wound up and set in motion by Danny's own odd mind, and his own. Had it been Watson who had told him a man had dropped dead of a stroke one day on the rope court? Or had it been Ullman? It didn't matter. There had been an assassination on the 3rd floor. How many old quarrels, suicides, strokes? How many murders? Was Grady lurking somewhere in the West Wing with his axe, waiting for Danny to start him up so he could come back out of the woodwork? The puffed circle of bruises around Danny's neck, the twinkling, half-seen bottles in the deserted lounge, the radio, the dreams, the scrapbook he'd found in the cellar. Medic, are you here? I've been sleepwalking again, my dear. He got up suddenly, thrusting the snowshoes back out the door. He was shaking all over. He slammed the door and picked up the box with the battery in it. It slipped through his shaking fingers. Oh Christ, what if I cracked it and thumped over on its side? He pulled the flaps of the carton open and yanked the battery out, heedless of the acid that might be leaking through the battery's casing if it had cracked. But it hadn't. It was whole. A little sigh escaped his lips. Cradling it, he took it over to the skidoo and put it on its platform near the front of the engine. He found a small adjustable wrench on one of the shelves and attached the battery cables quickly and with no trouble. The battery was live, no need to use a charger on it. There had been a crackle of electricity and a small odor of ozone when he slipped the positive cable onto its terminal. The job done, he stood away, wiping his hands nervously on his faded denim jacket. There, it should work. No reason why not. No reason at all except it was part of the Overlook, and that the Overlook really didn't want them out of here. Not at all. The Overlook was having one hell of a good time. There was a little boy to terrorize, a man and his woman to set one against the other. And if it played its cards right, they could end up flitting through the Overlook's halls like insubstantial shades in a Shirley Jackson novel. Whatever walked in Hill House walked alone. But you wouldn't be alone in the Overlook, oh no. There would be plenty of company here. But there was really no reason why the snowmobile shouldn't start. Except, of course, except he still really didn't want to go. Yes, except for that. He stood looking at the skidoo, his breath puffing out in frozen little plumes. I'm like breaking down. He walked to it the way he wanted it to be, the way it had been. When he had come in here and he'd had no doubts going down would be the wrong decision, he'd known that then. Wendy was only scared of the boogeyman summoned up by a single hysterical little boy. Now, suddenly, he could see her side. It was like his play, his damnable play. He no longer knew which side he was on, or how things should come out. Once he saw the face of a god in those jumbled blacks and whites, it was everybody out of the pool. You could never unsee it. Others might laugh and say it's nothing. Just a lot of splotches with no meaning. Give me a good old craft master paint by the numbers any day. But you would always see the face of Christ our Lord looking out at you. You'd seen it in one gestalt leap. The consciousness and unconsciousness melding in that one shocking moment of understanding. You would always see it. You were damned to always see it. I've been sleepwalking again, my dear. It had been all right until he had seen Danny playing in the snow. It was Danny's fault. Everything had been Danny's fault. He was the one with the shining or whatever it was. It wasn't a shining, it was a curse. If he and Wendy had been here alone, they could have passed the winter quite nicely. No pain, no strain on the brain. Don't want to leave? Can't? The Overlook didn't want them to go, and he didn't want them to go either. Not even Danny. Maybe he was part of it now. Perhaps the Overlook, large and rambling Samuel Johnson that was, had picked him to be its Boswell. You say the new caretaker writes? Very good, sign him on. Time we told our side. Let's get rid of the woman and his snot-nosed kid first, however. We don't want him to be distracted. We don't... He was standing by the snowmobile's cockpit, his head starting to ache again. What did it all come down to? Go or stay? Very simple. Keep it simple. Shall we go or shall we stay? If we go, how long will it be before you find the local hole in Sidewinder? A voice inside him asked. The dark place with the lousy color TV that unshaven and unemployed men spend the day watching game shows on? Where's the piss in the men's rooms? Where the piss in the men's room smells 2,000 years old, and there's always a sodden camel butt unraveling in the toilet bowl. Where the beer's 30 cents a glass and you cut it with salt, and the jukebox is loaded with 70 country oldies. How long? Oh Christ, he was so afraid it wouldn't be long at all. I can't win, he said very softly. That was it. It was like trying to play solitaire with one of the aces missing from the deck. Abruptly, he leaned over the Skidoo's motor compartment and yanked off the magneto. It came off with sickening ease. He looked at it for a moment, then went to the equipment shed's back door and opened it. From here, the view of the mountains was unobstructed. Picture postcard beautiful in the twinkling brightness of morning. An unbroken field of snow rose to the first pines about a mile distant. He flung the magneto as far out into the snow as he could. It went much further than it should have. There was a light puff of snow when it fell. The light breeze carried the snow granules away to fresh resting places. Disperse there, I say. There's nothing to see. It's all over. Disperse. He felt at peace. He stood in the doorway for a long time, breathing the good mountain air, and then he closed it firmly and went back to the other door to tell Wendy they would be staying. On the way, he stopped and had a snowball fight with Danny. And that's the end, chap. I mean, not the end, but not like the end, but like the end for now. We're on to chapter 34, The Hedges. I'm gonna have to like remember that, because this is like getting very long. Very long. I remember I used to like manually keep track of like the page numbers so I could instantly go, but now I can more or less like estimate it. But yeah, let's see how we're doing. I mean, I don't know. I mean, there were a couple new people here, surprisingly, which doesn't really happen that often during streams of like ASMR stuff. I mean, we have like a couple people. Let me see where I want to direct all this energy to. We could raid an art channel. We could always do that. Let me make sure. I really hope this is, because last time I tried to find someone on Twitch like on my browser, it started like auto-playing. Let me just mute it for a second. That way if it does, then it won't like mess with me. So, I mean, at least you guys won't hear it. So let's see, Twitch.tv. Yeah. Okay. Let's see, we can find someone doing something. At least I hope so. I'm talking like this now because it's like it's more conducive to the state of my vocal cords. Please understand. Let's see what the gamble has to offer to us today. Oh, let's see. We got some people doing like, man, Paint Tool Sci. That's a program I have not seen in a while. Well, Oh, this person seems they seem cute. We can raid Minis. That's such a cute name. Okay, everyone be cool. Be cool for my sake, okay? Don't be weird. Be a good audience, okay? So yeah, we're doing that Friday. We're gonna be doing some like assets editing stuff. I think it's gonna be fun. But anyways, yeah, that's gonna be it for me. I'm signing off. So hope everyone has a good morning, evening, afternoon, night, whatever it is, wherever you are. And I love you. Mwah!